This chapter will be about pawn structure transformation, or actually, to be more exact, about voluntary creation of a pawn island, of pawn islands. It will be only one game, but I think that it shows it very well, and that it would help improve understanding of the subject. Normally, in many books, you would basically see advice, well, do not create extra pawn islands if it's not needed. But sometimes it is needed, and sometimes somehow it makes it easier to play and improve play. This is a game between Wesley So and Veselin Topalov. It is a recent game. It has been played in one of those Syncvilles. This particular one was at Syncville 2016. Let's see how did this game go. It was English opening, c4, e5, g3, knight f6. We will reach one of the most typical pawn structures in English opening. That's why this game is actually very useful, because I think that players can use similar kind of ideas. Viewers can use similar kind of ideas. So c4, e5, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, d5, c d5, knight d5, knight c3, knight b6. So we have this dragon colors reverse. Knight f3, knight c6, castles, bishop e7, d3, castles, a3, bishop e6, bishop e3, knight d5, knight d5, bishop d5, queen a4, rook e8, rook ac1, a6. All those moves are kind of typical moves. I'm not sure what is exactly theory here, but everything looks kind of normal, played many times. And now white trades this bishop on d5, because this bishop stands very well. On one hand, this bishop is protecting king, but this bishop on d5 is a good piece. So knight d2, bishop takes on g2, king g2, knight d4, bishop d4, e d4, queen b3, rook b8. Okay, this is position of actually our interest. Let us try to analyze this position a little bit. White has a c file, black has e file. Black weakness is a little bit lesser than a white, because when you put this pawn on c6, it is protected by b7 pawn. So you have this kind of pawn chain. A white pawn on e2, okay, it is not easy for black to decisively attack it, but this pawn might hang. White cannot push his pawn so easily, because, okay, should white decide to push e4, black can take on e3. If white pushes, black can obviously take, and black is going to create a pawn islands to white. Or better to say, white is going to create a pawn islands to himself. So should white do it or not? White can also put his knight to e4. Let's say queen d7 can happen, queen c4, c6, b4 to take some space, rook b d8, rook c2, bishop f8. This is kind of typical position of Sicilian colors reversed. This pawn cannot so easily be attacked, but on the other hand, where is white play is also not so clear. Maybe to try to push a4, move the rook, b5, but white needs to be careful at some moment not to be somehow hit with a move like f5 at some unfortunate moment, and then this pawn weakness to become a problem. But this is, for example, possibility to white could have played this way in the case that he wanted to. He could have certainly played it this way, and it would be like some Sicilian colors reversed. And I think a lot of people would have played it this way. What Wesley did in this game is interesting, and that's why I did select it. I did select this game for this video. Wesley decided to voluntarily agree to pawn islands, and he here played move e4. Interesting decision. Obviously, black has to take, because if black doesn't take, white achieve what he wanted. I mean, he moved his pawn to e4, and he will start rolling. So d takes, obviously. F takes. Now let's see. We got dramatic change of a pawn structure in a matter of only one move. Now these pawns can become a power, because they can take space. Can also become a target. Black has, in general, healthier pawn structure, because black does not have pawn islands. White does have a pawn islands, and these pawns can be targeted. But white got something in return. With these pawns, he's going to take some space, and he got a file for his rook. Position is probably approximately balanced, but not easy to play for both sides. Let's see, for example, what do you think, readers, viewers? If we remove bishop and the knight, let's suppose those two light pieces don't exist, who will profit from this in this position? In this position, black will profit from this, because then indeed in a heavy pieces ending, pawn islands are not handy. So white needs to keep this knight on a board. Let's see, rook f8, knight e4, queen d7. White tries to use his f-file, because obviously it doesn't make any sense to do something on a c-file, because black will play move c6 and this pawn cannot be targeted. So rook f3, rook b d8, hitting indeed one of the pawns in this pawn island, d4, c6. Rook cf1, queen d5. Black does not mind trades. Bishop trades he doesn't mind. Queen trades he also does not mind. Because if white does not have some sort of way to utilize his f-file and to create some sort of attack versus a black king, to create some threats, then obviously black is basically happy because he gets very healthy pawn structure. So queen d5, queen c2. Wesley keeps queens. g6. Bishop is controlling the dark square, so why not? Topalov controls square f5. Now, here white plays clever move, because I think that if black would be given a chance, black will consider f5. So white pushes move g4, trying to put everything on white and to secure position of this knight. Rook d8, h3, bishop d8. That's why, look, Topalov, kind of he's thinking, he did provoke already move d4. Move d4 happened. Pawn is still on e3. So he thinks, what is now weakness? d4 is not weakness, because it is protected very well. e3, perhaps. So let's put a rook to e-file, so to be able to target weaknesses. That's why rook e8, h3, bishop d8. Knight c3. Queen e6. For the time being, it is kind of a status quo for both sides. Knight a4. Wesley would like to provoke move b6. Position is probably approximately equal. So knight a4. b6, however, is not forced. Queen d5 was a possibility. And maybe to play b6 later, maybe not. So this was certainly a possible move. But there is nothing really wrong with the b6, because pawn cannot be targeted so easily. So it is a matter of a choice whether or not you want to play a move like b6 here. Topalov played at b6, rook c1, trying to create a freshly created target. So actually, let's say move like queen d5 was possible. Move b6 is calculation related, because now game can become very concrete. Rook c1, here Topalov will miscalculate somehow situation in this tactical exchanges. He pushed here c5. Move queen d5 was certainly possible. Not easy for a human to basically judge it. Easy for a computer. Because it transpires after queen c6, queen g5, that a little bit compromised position on a king's side of those pawns and inability to on time get back with the knight in play gives black enough compensation. Because now black really can target white pawn islands. Queen g5, okay, targets e3, rook e1, rook e6. Queen c2. Queen d7 looks active, but is not more than equality, because let's say rook e7, queen d6, rook e6, and now if I move my queen to the king's side to protect my pawns, the problem is that if this knight had been on c3, white would be much better, pawn up for nothing. But unfortunately for white here there is move queen b5, targeting a knight and targeting a pawn. So a move like queen f4 is a question mark. After rook e6, queen c2 can be played, but now black targets white. Knight c3 back, takes. Now it is important for black to be clever, because if black takes queen g4, he will run under attack. Rook g3, queen moves, rook h1, because white gains many tempis. But black can here, let's say, play a move like bishop c7, and black has absolutely enough compensation, because black is going to get his pawn back. Now these pawn islands which white created do start to feel, as white is starting to get some problems to protect his weaknesses. So let's say if king f1, black can choose between queen g4, queen d2, queen g2, which is probably about equal position, or can play move king g7, keeping the tension, because it is also not so obvious what white will basically do. But I guess to take a pawn is normal. So queen d5 in this position, queen d5 to swing the queen on a g5 and then play move h5 and to target those pawn islands was making sense for a black and keeping equality. Topalov's move c5 is also not wrong, trying to open up position, but he will make a mistake later. D takes c5, b5, knight c3, queen c6. Okay, black targets those two pawns. I guess Topalov did choose for c5. Why? Because in our previous line, queen d5, queen c6, queen g5, it is obvious that black is attacking white pawn islands. But on the other hand, it is not immediately clear that black is getting his pawn back. Idea of Topalov c5 is clear that black dc5, b5, knight c3 forced move, queen c6, is obvious that black gets his pawn back. Queen d2. And here Topalov made a wrong judgment that is going to cost him the game. He will judge that removing e-pawn is going to give him chances versus a white king, and that white's c-passer, probably he thought that white king will be somehow a weakness and that white will not get the time to capitalize on this passer. Up to now, black played very well, and he simply needed to take queen c5. After knight d5, queen a7, white has a dominant knight, but this knight is well contained with the bishop from d8. White has a pawn weakness, but this pawn weakness is not easy to target. Probably position is about approximately equal. Topalov played move rook e5, with idea after b4, what happened in the game, to play move bishop g5, because he is getting his pawn back. I guess that he simply overestimated potential weakness of this king. Why? Because now actually this c pawn is going to decide the game, and very soon. So to let this c pawn live was a grave mistake that is going to cost black the game. Rook d1, bishop e3, queen d7. I think that black already understood what he has done. Queen a8, knight d5. Now everything is going with the music. Bishop g5, c6. Now it is obvious that it was crazy to let this pawn live. Now knight is strong, pawn is running, king, nothing can happen to this king. There could be one meaningless check on e2, which doesn't mean anything. So bishop h4, rook d2, protecting second rank, but not even necessary. Move c7 would have also won, let's say check, king g1, queen a7, if rook c2, rook df1, king is weak. If queen check, king h1, simply there are zero threats. Wesley played move rook d2, rook e1, rook c2, just capitalizing on his pawn. This passer will become a queen. King g7, knight b6, queen b8, queen d4 check, and Topalov resigned because of various reasons. Well, c6 pawn can decide, knight d7 can decide. There are simply plenty of moves here. For us, what is interesting in this game, that's why I picked it up, is this decision to create voluntary creation of pawn islands and the strategic fight that ensued. In such a kind of position, black went for a tactical situation after move b6, which he did not necessarily need to do this. And then we got this tactical fight where black could have sacrificed the pawn, getting it later back because of white pawn islands, or do what Topalov did, also temporary sacrifice, but now getting it back for sure and immediate. But here making a grave mistake to let white's pass pawn live instead of taking on c5 with equal game. So I think this is quite an instructive example of a decision-making process and how easy it is for even world best players to make a wrong judgment and to make a mistake, a crucial mistake. And I hope that this, even though it was just one single example, that for people playing those kind of positions, so for people who would enter these kind of positions, that this has been useful.